Close your eyes, Josh. Take a deep breath and relax. The universe is deathless because having no finite self, it stays infinite. Now outside. Let my voice be your guide.
Dalton. Dalton! Dalton!
Tell me where my son is. Please.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. And as voted for by everyone in the latest poll, today we'll be exploring Insidious, the 2010 supernatural horror written by Leigh Whannell and directed by James Wan. Starring Patrick Wilson, Rose Byrne, Barbara Hershey and Lin Shaye, it revolves around the desperate attempts of the Lambert family to recover their son Dalton, who, in his comatose state, has entered an astral plane called the Further, where many insidious entities want to inhabit his body.
Is deathless because having no finite self, it stays infinite.
I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm looking for my son, Dalton.
The movie opens with a creepy night tour of the Lambert house. Josh is sleeping in his room as a child, 30 years before the main events of the film. The camera keeps moving around the home to reveal an old creepy woman in black waiting outside with a candle. We then cut to the present, where we're introduced to Josh and his wife Renee, who've recently moved into a new home with their 3 children, Foster, Callie, and Dalton. Waking up in the early morning, Renee continues to unpack their stuff and looks through their family photos when Dalton appears behind her, saying that he doesn't like his room. While we're not given much information at first, Renee says that she's also having trouble sleeping, indicating that something was not quite right in the abode. Dalton then asks if she could show him a photo of his father Josh when he was little, but Renee states that he's always been camera shy and disliked taking photos of himself. We are going to find out that there's a very important reason for this, as things begin to get out of hand. Of course, it's not long before strange things begin happening around the new home. Not only does Renee find books she organized scattered across the floor, but her sheet music seems to be disappearing.
And honey, if you want to look at my books, please don't leave them all over the floor.
I didn't touch your books.
At the same time, Josh gets ready for work and plucks out a grey hair, another subtle but crucial sign of things to come.
Man, what? Every time I think I've pulled you out, you grow back in.
Later that day, some noise draws Renee to the attic, and wanting to get a better view, she climbs the ladder to turn the light on and breaks one of the steps. When Josh returns home late from work that night, Renee asks if he'd seen her sheet music. She explains she'd unpacked every box and that they were nowhere to be found. The door to the attic swings open beside Dalton, luring him upstairs, and despite a slight trepidation, donned in a Superman cape, the brave boy goes up to investigate, like his mother had done earlier that day. But when he tries to climb the ladder and reach for the lights, he loses his footing on the broken step and bangs his head on the ground. Gathering himself, Dalton then looks over at the dark and hears terrifying crackling sounds around him, causing him to scream. Josh and Renee immediately run up and find him on the ground, and although he saw something in the dark, he tells them that he'd merely scraped his head and banged his leg in the fall. As Josh carries him downstairs and explains that he's not invincible despite being a superhero, Renee also notices her sheet music in the attic, making her think that Dalton had hid it. After joking around that they should put the kids on child leashes to ensure they were safe, Renee finally tells him that she wants things to be different in this house, alluding to the notion the family's been dealing with something they tried to escape by relocating.
Thanks for letting me take some time to work on my music.
Come on. I love all your songs.
Shut up! You do not.
Stop it.
Unfortunately, their difficulties are about to increase exponentially the following morning. With everybody up and having breakfast, Renee tells Josh to wake Dalton up, but when his father goes into his room and desperately tries to get his attention, the boy remains in a catatonic state. Rushing him to the hospital, the Lamberts are informed by Dr. Surkaz that there's no brain damage. The surgeon continues by saying the boy is technically in a coma and not currently reacting to stimuli. He essentially has no sleep-wake cycle, but there's also no brain trauma or infection, with his scans picking up no irregularities. Surkaz tells him that he's never seen anything like it. Renee then desperately asks if there's something they can do, and the surgeon merely tells them that the best option is to continue testing before responding to another call. We then cut to 3 months later, where Dalton is being monitored by a home nurse. With their finances drained by medical bills and no change in his condition, Renee is being taught how to safely insert his feeding tubes. The reality that life will never be the same is beginning to weigh heavily on every member of the Lambert family, whose joy has been replaced by enduring sadness. As Renee struggles to play music, burdened with grief, she hears the voice of a man whispering on the baby monitor. Not sure if it was interference, she moves closer to the bedrooms with the monitor in hand. To Renee's horror, the voice becomes clearer and can be heard whispering that he wants them to give it to him. The voice then angrily yells that it wants it now, causing her to drop the monitor and run upstairs. She enters to see Callie in tears, but no sign of the man she heard. Going into Foster's room, she finds an award he received from school that day, and asks why he didn't tell them. Foster shrugs it off before ultimately revealing that he was scared to be in the house. When his mother questions what he was scared of, Foster reveals that he was terrified of Dalton, who he claims has been walking around at night. Making things worse is the fact that Josh is dismissing the strange occurrences, while intentionally staying at work longer each day.
I heard this noise coming from Callie's room. It was on the baby monitor.
It's probably just interference. Those things are always picking up somebody else's.
As he begins to give a rational explanation for the mysterious events that were happening, someone loudly knocks on their front door. Josh comes down to answer and uses his flashlight to check outside, but finds no one there. After carefully locking all the doors and checking the alarm was still activated, he proceeds to go back upstairs. At the same time, Renee hears their daughter crying and rushes over to her room to find a long-haired man standing behind the cot. Hearing his wife scream, Josh rushes into the room but doesn't find anyone inside. As Renee tries to explain what she witnessed, the alarm then suddenly goes off, forcing him back downstairs. Chillingly, when he goes to disable the alarm, he finds the front door wide open. Despite the clear signs that something or someone was toying with them, trying to both cope with the current events while suppressing similar events that occurred in his childhood, Josh continues to leave early in the morning and arrive home from work later each night, much to the frustration of Renee, who is struggling to keep it together. Intensifying things is an unexplained ominous red handprint stained onto the sheet beside Dalton, indicating that something was after him.
You've been coming home late every single night.
What choice do I have? Gotta pay Dalton's bills.
Ever since we've moved in, everything's just gone wrong.
You think our house is haunted?
I don't think it. I know it.
Things reach a boiling point that night, when Renee is attacked by the long-haired apparition that had been in Callie's room, and while Josh, who was sleeping on the couch downstairs, didn't see him, he finally agrees that they should move to another home. It's here that we meet Josh's mother Lorraine, who is helping them move and assisting them with the kids, and boy do they need her around. Looking at one of their family photos, Lorraine tells Renee that she can't believe they got Josh to stand still for a photograph. Not realizing the significance of the statement, Renee brushes it off, saying that she can't believe they're moving house again.
You must think I'm crazy.
Nobody, not me or anybody, knows what you're going through right now. Whatever you have to do to get through it, do it.
Of course, it's not long before Renee is haunted by another apparition, this time of a small child running around the house. Terrified by the persisting events, Renee goes biblical and calls both a priest and Lorraine for advice. Together, they determine that this thing from the other house has essentially followed them here. Josh is both surprised and worried to see his wife behaving erratically, but when he goes to criticize her, his mother confirms that what is happening to Renee is real.
I came today because last night I had a dream about this place. I was in this house, but it was late at night. I was afraid. I went into Dalton's room. There was something in there with him.
She explained she asked who it was, and it told her it was a visitor. When pressed on what it wanted, the entity then pointed to the boy and said Dalton. To Lorraine's horror, the red-faced entity suddenly appears behind Josh, furious that they were now aware of his presence. It then locks itself in Dalton's room and destroys all the furniture, before leaving its terrifying handprint beside him once again, indicating it had claimed him and would not be letting go without a fight. Luckily, while at their lowest point, Lorraine tells them that she knows someone who can help if they're willing to ask. And so, the Lamberts welcome Elise Rayner and her enthusiastic recruits Specs and Tucker into the home to investigate.
Where is Elise?
She sent us ahead to do some preliminary tests.
Helps weed out the nut jobs.
When her paranormal advisors pick up a disturbance with their equipment and see one of the ghosts, Elise finally arrives to review the Insidious infection. Carrying herself with dignified strength and a contagious warmth that eases the weariness of the Lamberts, Elise leads them into Dalton's room and says hello to the sleeping child. Hearing the sound of crackling from above, she looks up in horror and begins describing the entity she can see on the ceiling to Specs, who draws a black figure with a red face and dark, hollow eyes, the same figure that Lorraine had seen earlier. Elise explains that Dalton has the ability to astral project while sleeping, and that he's been doing it since he was very young. The reason that Dalton is in a comatose state is because he has fearlessly travelled too far into different spiritual worlds. Wrongly believing the projections were dreams, the boy consequently became lost in a land called the Further, a place for the tormented souls of the dead.
The Further is a world far beyond our own, yet it's all around us. A place without time as we know it. A place not meant for the living.
It is essentially a dark and timeless astral world filled with tortured souls and nightmarish spirits that plays a central role in the Insidious franchise. While it's not hell, it has been hinted that it may lead there. From what we've gathered, it's infinitely far away from the material dimension, and still, it permeates every inch of it. Shrouded in mist, the Further has no major source of light, except for those contained in electrical outlets. It mirrors the material world, so houses, objects and landscapes appear identical to their counterparts in the real world. But here, memories from the deceased can alter reality.
Tell me where my son is, please.
Among the souls that dwell in the Further include, but are not limited to, the Doll family, the long-haired fiend, the little boy, the bride in black, the crying woman, and the red-faced demon. The Dolls are the spirits of a family that was shot to death by their daughter. Having been made to relive their deaths over and over again by the red-faced demon, it is hinted that they've come to enjoy it. The long-haired fiend is the spirit of a violent and destructive man, presumed to be the right hand of the demon. The little boy is actually not a boy at all, but the spirit of an old man that suffered from dwarfism. The crying woman is assumed to have died tragically, and out of all the spirits encountered in the Further, she seems to be the least malevolent. The creepy bride in black, on the other hand, is the spirit of an old woman that had been trying to steal the body of Josh since he was a boy. In truth, she's not a woman, but a serial killer named Parker Crane that assumed the moniker the Bride in Black. The red-faced demon, however, is the worst of the bunch. Little is known about him except that he's a malevolent and violent entity that appears to be in control of the Further. Tall and gaunt with a dark humanoid figure, the red-faced demon is a monstrous and sinister creature who, according to Elise, only wanted to possess a body in order to cause pain to others. While Dalton's spirit is in this other world, his lifeless body has become vacant. The tormented souls in the Further crave another chance at life through Dalton's body, but the malicious demon wants to use him to inflict pain and sorrow. Although skeptical at first, Giga Dad eventually relents when he discovers that Dalton had been drawing pictures that resembled the demonic figure Elise and Lorraine had described. With that, they run a session to try and communicate with the boy, but the demon uses Dalton's body to fight them, along with the other spirits. Left with no other choice, Elise and Lorraine finally reveal a secret they'd been hiding for decades. Josh could also astral project and was terrorized by an evil spirit when he was a child. Lorraine then shows them pictures from Josh's childhood, revealing the same woman from the beginning of the film, moving closer and closer to Josh in each picture, explaining his fear of photos. The bride in black had befriended his astral body in the hopes of luring him into the Further and taking possession of his physical form, and so the boy was taught to forget. Despite the overwhelming risk, Elise says that their best chance of finding and returning Dalton's soul was for Josh to use the gift he'd repressed for decades, to which he agrees. And so, sitting him in a chair, Elise places Josh in a trance, projecting his spirit into the shadowy world of the Further.
Do not draw attention to yourself. If they realize you are not one of them, they will come for your physical body in this world.
After encountering a spectral apparition of himself as a child, Josh makes his way to the same home that he and his family had recently moved out of. Encountering the various spirits, he finds a red door and defeats the long-haired fiend trying to stop him from going inside. Entering the demon's lair, he discovers Dalton chained on the floor inside a cavernous theater and the terrifying demon watching them from above. While he manages to free him and the pair quickly flee, the hungry demon follows them in close pursuit. Unfortunately, the spirits of the further also begin to cross over into the real world, seeking to take hold of the bodies of Josh and Dalton. While they manage to get close to the exit, Josh ends up leaving his son to confront the spirit of the old woman that had been tormenting him throughout his life. As he shouts for her to get away from him, screaming that he isn't afraid of her, she retreats back into the darkness. And despite the red-faced demon's attempts to claim the boy, Josh and Dalton both awaken in the real world, forcing all the spirits to vanish back into the further. With the family now happily reunited, Renee, Dalton and Lorraine chat in the kitchen, while Elise and Josh pack up the equipment in the living room. But sensing that something was wrong, Elise quickly takes a photo of Josh. Much to our terror, Josh flips out in a rage and strangles Elise to death. Hearing Josh yelling, Renee goes into the room to find Elise dead and Josh gone, and when she checks the camera, Renee's horrified to see a picture of the bride in black, implying that she'd finally managed to possess Josh's body following their confrontation in the further. Responding to Renee's screams, Josh puts his hand on his wife and says that he's right here. Confirming our worst fears, the post-credit scene features the bride in black blowing out a candle as the screen fades into darkness, paving the way for Insidious 2.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Well, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that voted we cover Insidious. If there's anything else you'd like for me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.